by request, a tour of my hugely customized sim rig, including what games I like to play. We're back and let's do a quick update on the car. For the last month or so, the rear drive shafts are being made by an engineering place and they should be ready in a week or so. And if you feel like that's taking a long time, well, during that month there's a period with a couple of long weekends and public holidays, so everything kind of grinds to a halt. But we are getting close and the place has agreed to do an interview style video with footage that they've shot explaining the whole manufacturing process. Which brings us to today, a video that I've been planning to make for a while based on requests in the comments of all the videos thus far, my sim rig. We're going to do this in detail in two halves. Firstly, we're going to go through all of the hardware and modifications, and then we'll cover the games and sims I like to play. Now there's no avoiding that I've sunk quite a bit of money into this over the years, and most of that was around 2019. My main channel was growing to the point where I was going to be able to go full-time the next year, but I was still working full-time as a teacher as well. I had a lot of expendable income, so I went to town. Even so, a lot of the stuff I got was second-hand to make it cheaper, and then I upgraded, and quite often I still got the cheapest version of whatever it was available, and then other stuff was a total splurge. One more thing before we continue, we don't talk about dust or cable management. The PC was purchased second-hand and has been upgraded a few times. And here are the specs. There's one big money item there, and that's the GPU. There's also plenty of RGB lighting, which definitely helps with lap times. Sitting on top, we have these wireless Astro headphones. They were expensive, but they're comfortable, the microphone is of high quality, and the battery lasts a very long time. Highly recommended. For the display, we have a Samsung 49-inch ultra-wide. As you can see, it's curved, and compared to triples, it's a pretty good compromise. I used to run VR, but it became such an event to use a sim rig. This is a lot easier to jump on or off without getting sweaty and giving myself weird hair. For interface, I have a wireless Logitech keyboard and trackpad combo. This is mounted on a custom designed and 3D printed arm that swivels it completely out of the way for easy entry and exit, but you can still adjust it and sit it in a great position to use while you're on the rig. It's available for free on printables, so go get it. If you haven't worked it out by now, the Cockpit is a motion simulator. This is the latest upgraded model, and mine was probably less than a third of this. They seem to have really exploded in price since then. It's a DOF Reality P3 model. At the time, it was the cheapest motion sim that was available to buy. And I can see looking at this animation there's been a lot more development, because when I got my one, it was quite floppy. I spent a fair bit of time fabricating custom alloy bracing all around it, the idea being to make it more rigid, but also to give me extra space for bolting on hardware. Before this, I was using a very simple track racer stand that used to slide away from me every time I pressed the brakes. So this was a huge upgrade and a bunch of fun, especially when mixed with VR and a game like Roller Coaster Simulator. Back then, tracking motion to compensate for the moving rig wasn't very reliable. So I switched to the ultra-wide and adapted a next level racing stand to fit it directly to the motion system. This was of course after prototyping and testing with a much heavier weight strapped on, to make sure my beautiful new monitor was not going to fall off and get damaged. The seat is an actual road car seat. I got it secondhand but new, bargain, because a guy had abandoned his road car project. And inside the seat is a little secret related to this control box. Because hidden in the foam underneath the seat are a series of 4 transducers. They're controlled by the surround sound amp, and they're embedded flush into the seat foam after I trace them and then used a trimmer router to make the right size cavity. With the seat back together, you can't see or feel anything different. But thanks to some clever software, various vibrations are transferred into your butt as you're driving. Think road texture, curb strikes, engine vibration, you name it, it adds quite a lot of immersion. Other accessories are this twin fan system. The blowing force goes up with vehicle speed. I don't have it on in winter, but in summer it's actually really good at cooling you down when you're driving. And mounted next to these, I have a Stream Deck that I use as a button box, both to launch each sim, as well as providing an interface to control the car while driving. One last accessory is an XDN display, controlled by SimHub, and I made this one from scratch, 3D printing the enclosure and designing all of the graphics and overlays in Adobe Illustrator. It's got multiple screens of information, and this was a really fun project to create. Onto the actual driving hardware, and the wheelbase is a SimMagic M10. At the time, it was the only budget direct drive wheel available. I think it's actually quite old now, but I'm still really happy with it. As well as the Formula style wheel that came with it, I've got a round wheel to suit certain cars and an actual road car wheel that has no buttons, and that's great for vintage cars and drift. And something I really love about this wheelbase is the quick release system. It's really high quality, in fact much better than the one on my actual race car. It makes changing between the wheels really convenient, only taking around 10 seconds. My main complaint with this setup is that the button mapping beyond the paddle shifters is different for the two wheels. So that makes mapping between the two quite difficult, so this is an area where it's actually much worse than an old Logitech G27 or a Thrustmaster T300 RS, both of which I've run in the past. But compared to those, the feel, strength and fidelity of the force feedback is a million times better, despite the M10 being a superseded model. My shifter is from Fanatec and I'm really happy with it. As well as functioning like a normal H pattern, we can toggle the mode with this heavy duty switch down the bottom. That locks the movement from side to side and allows it to push forward or back to act like a sequential shifter. Compared to the sloppy shifter on the G27, and to a lesser extent the shifting action on this Thrustmaster model, this Fanatec shifter is a lot more precise and I rarely have misshifts these days. I also have the Thrustmaster Sparko mod handbrake. This pretty much only gets used in rally games. This replaced a cheap eBay hydraulic handbrake. It was way more rigid, but the electrical side was very unreliable, so I had to replace it. And finally my pedals, which are Husqvarna Sprints. Years ago these were fairly premium, but I guess these days pedals have come a long way and you can pay a lot more money than this, particularly with active pedals. Well, mounted on the back of the brake and throttle, I have some rumble motors from gamepads. These are run by SimHub using an Arduino control box, and the one on the brake pedal is set to vibrate when you lock up the wheels, and the vibration motor on the back of the throttle is set to vibrate when there's wheel spin. I'm a huge fan of this system as it adds a lot of good feedback and it was pretty inexpensive to set up. Just above the setup is a piece of Mark Webber's 2006 Williams F1 car for good luck. And that is everything, and as you might expect, I'm pretty happy with it as I've built it to my own tastes. If I was doing this again, I would probably not go for the motion platform as I rarely have it turned on while I'm using the rig. And when I do use it, I connect up the harness, which makes it much more immersive. It recreates that feeling of being tightly strapped into a car, and this also prevents you from leaning against the motion to compensate yourself. I've mounted the back of the harness on a part of the rig that doesn't move, so when the seat comes forward pitching for braking, the belts feel tighter, which again is more immersive. The key for getting the most out of the motion is to really limit the range of movement. You're never going to be able to replicate G-forces, so I have it set up instead to pitch forward under brakes and to focus the movement on the undulations and bumps of the track rather than the movement of the car from side to side. If the range of motion is set up too big, it just becomes distracting. It doesn't feel any more realistic, but it definitely takes your attention away from driving. This more subtle approach is a lot more immersive, it's very enjoyable, but it doesn't make you any faster, which is why I don't have it turned on most of the time. So that's all of my hardware, but what about the games and sims that I play? Well, here's my 2 cents on each. This is highly subjective, so here are some things that I'm looking for. In any sim, I like to have a nice selection of cars and tracks. I would prefer it to be realistic rather than arcade or simcade. I'm very particular about being able to feel the car properly and having good feedback, so this is not only the force feedback from the wheel, but how well the sim plays with my pedal shakers and speakers in the seat. Obviously, I want to be having fun, and in the past I cared a lot about online multiplayer. The first game that should be in any sim racer's collection is the original Assetto Corsa. It might be really old, but thanks to the community it's still thriving. Content Manager, Soul, CSP all modernized the game, but it's the amazing array of cars and tracks, most of them being free, that make this game incredible. From my point of view, it's got all of the tracks that I would hope to drive on in real life from Australia. So if I want to practice driving at Eastern Creek before taking the car there for real, I absolutely can. The same for London Raceway, and I used AC to learn the track before going there for my real life shakedown. The problem is I don't quite have a car that matches mine, so I rotate between a few that are similar. If you're someone who creates car mods for Assetto Corsa and can help, please get in touch. I would say I like the driving feel in Assetto Corsa, but I don't love it. I would prefer a bit more feedback to feel exactly what the car is doing. But it's still a really worthwhile tool for learning, and I think in terms of fun, for hot lapping at least, it's hard to beat because you can pretty much drive any car on any circuit from around the world. In the past I had a little stint with ACC. At the time I found it the most complete sim available because it had a lot of the mods and features that the community had added to AC but baked right in from the developers. I found it a little dull, however. I like, but I don't love GT3 cars, and the graphics were always just a little bit blurry and gave me a bit of a headache, so I moved on quickly. The newest AC is AC Evo. There's not a great deal to do at the moment, but so far I like the driving feel enough, and I look forward to seeing what they're going to add in the future. I'm not sure how interested I am in the open world and career mode type of thing. When I first got the game, I quite enjoyed doing all of the license tests, but recently on the update, all of my progress seems to be wiped, so that's pretty frustrating, and I probably won't commit to doing those again until I know that's not going to repeat. So how about a title like Race Room Racing Experience? I actually really like the driving feel of this, but in many ways it feels quite dated and left behind because it's not as popular in the community. In terms of feeling exactly what the car is doing and being able to feel through the steering wheel exactly how much grip there is, to me Race Room feels as good as anything else. The car and track selection is okay for me. I'd probably play it more often if it didn't feel like such a chore. For instance, it takes a very long time to open up. We're talking a minute of just sitting here on this splash screen before you can finally get into the game. So if you need to change any settings that require a restart, that's really not very fun at all. This brings us to Automobilista or AMS2, which I have quite mixed feelings on. The car selection is quite broad with a lot of historic licensed vehicles too, and these days it has most of the major circuits as well as a great bunch of South American ones you might not have heard of. When it comes to the realism and driving feel, well, that's where I'm torn. In terms of feeling what the car is doing, how the weight is shifting, the grip of the tyres, whether they're locking or slipping, I feel AMS2 is excellent. I've always felt like I was getting a lot of good feedback as to what the car was doing and able to drive fast pretty quickly. In terms of realism, I think it's fair to say these cars are a lot more slidey than what you'll find in other sims. And maybe that's real, maybe that's not. I haven't driven all of the cars, but one feeling I just can't shake is that the cars are far too forgiving. You can drive just as fast sliding around like this as you can being more precise and trying to be neat. In fact, this footage you're seeing here was from a world record time trial lap. And this footage here is from another one. As you can see, it doesn't really punish wheel spin or oversteer. For a long time in many of the cars, I felt like there was an invisible rubber band that would prevent you from spinning too far. There's no way in this situation that F1 car isn't going backwards into the wall. But here's the thing, AMS is my most competitive sim. I think I'm actually really good at exploiting those lack of boundaries. In the past I've set plenty of world records, and I've been highly successful in competitive online racing and leagues. But when I bought my race car, I was quite worried that AMS2 was teaching me bad habits and setting me up to push the car too far and have a silly accident. So I stopped playing it and spent any sim time on Assetto Corsa trying to learn the Australian tracks. Now more recently I know they've made the game more punishing, and I found that out to great effect when I fired up AMS2 for the first time in a while to make this video. Based on that, maybe it's time I gave it another chance. A few years ago I had a decent stint on iRacing looking for some more competitive and populated multiplayer. In some ways I found iRacing by far the most superior sim, and in other ways it was deeply flawed. The first thing to say, it was an absolute money pit because you have a subscription cost, and then anytime you enter the championship you're probably going to need to spend more money just to buy the tracks in that series, and these are way more expensive than DLC in other games. None of the third-party add-ons were free either, and I feel there was a pay-to-win culture in terms of buying setups to be competitive. Back then at least, if you want to race a bunch of people at any time of day, iRacing was king. You just couldn't beat it. They weren't perfect, but I found the physics better than I was expecting, because at the time iRacing had a reputation for going past a certain slip angle and you spinning off the track no matter what you did. But what I struggled with was that feel and feedback. When I tried it, I would describe driving most cars in iRacing quite numb. I know their philosophy is to simulate realistic steering rack forces, but the thing is you can't feel the G-force in your bum like a real car. So in my opinion, the job of good force feedback in a sim is to compensate for that, so you can actually feel what the car is doing. I fiddled endlessly with the factory iRacing settings, and I tried third-party force feedback apps too, but I never really felt comfortable driving fast and finding grip on the limit. I felt like practicing for a race was more about rote learning and memorizing exactly where to brake, rather than having a good idea of that but then adjusting for the grip and the conditions on the fly. So my competitiveness was inconsistent, and overall I just wasn't enjoying myself. I was experiencing more frustration than I was fun, and I'd like to add that the driving standards weren't particularly good, and the community can be very set in their ways and toxic, which can also leave a sour taste. R-Factor 2 is a sim I've played around with previously, but never for that long. The interface was as frustrating and clunky as everyone said it would be, and that was a shame because I really loved the driving feel and the force feedback. Its successor, Le Mans Ultimate, is a game I have a lot more time for because the interface and the experience is a lot more modern. Like R Factor 2, I really enjoy the feedback and driving feel in Le Mans Ultimate, and the feel of driving with cold brakes and slicks is completely the opposite of AMS2. It feels like you need to be really careful to nurse the car or it'll spit you into a wall. I think ultimately what's going to limit my time on this sim is the narrow choice of tracks and cars, just like ACC. And there's another problem that drives me nuts, and that I can't seem to get my steering wheel range of motion calibrated properly, and it feels like I need way more lock compared to every other sim, which leads to an overbearing feeling of understeer. I've tried to tweak this, but I can't quite seem to get there for every car. I'm not much of a rally guy, but I have Dirt Rally 2 installed just for fun. I wouldn't say I'm particularly good at this game, but it's so much fun to turn on the motion rig, strap yourself in, and try and survive through some sort of off-road stage. If someone came over and knew nothing about sim racing, this is the type of thing I would set up for them to try and blow their mind. Also installed simply for fun is BeamNG Drive. I play this for a laugh every now and again, normally doing one of the scenarios or missions. Another fantastic game to put on for beginners, setting someone up on a rock crawling stage, or just free roaming so they can have a giant crash and experience the amazing soft body physics. I know some people actually race in BeamNG, but I've got enough other sims to do that in, so I'm not really interested. Other things I have installed for fun are emulators, like a PS2 emulator, and that means you can play the old classics like Gran Turismo 4, and in case you didn't know, there's now a Spec 2 community modded version. Here's the beauty of this type of setup. You can use your regular controller to emulate a PS2 controller. That means navigating menus is really straightforward, but in-game you can use your wheel and pedals, and it has force feedback too. Now these old games are still pretty dated in some ways, but I'd say the driving feel is still pretty reasonable. If you want to have fun, it's also really worthwhile emulating old arcade games. Setup can be tricky, as here you can see the steering wheel was calibrated backwards. But persevering through this is worth it to play old classics like Le Mans 24 Hour, rally games like Sega Rally 2, where the handbrake works as well, and the old Daytona games as well, all of which, like the PS2, have working force feedback through the steering wheel. And with the Stream Deck as a button box, you can set up controls for each specific arcade game as you need to. The whole thing is a lot of fun, and I would highly recommend setting it up. I'm almost ashamed to admit I haven't been on my sim rig that much recently, but making this video and having a go at all of the sims reminded me just how much fun that it is. Considering how much time and money I've put into the sim rig, I probably should be using it some more. I used to do Sunday night league races on AMS2, but my enthusiasm was sharply curbed when most of the way into one season, somebody ran wide and took me out in the most egregious way possible. Pretty painful, but better on the sim than that same thing happening on the track.